Hello everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. I was gonna be moderating, but I'm just gonna pass it over to Lily, who's one of our newer team members who will be moderating the webinar today. Thank you for joining.
So hi everybody. Thank you for joining us today. As Jess said, my name's Lily and I will be the host moderator for today. I'm part of the ECOP Capacity Development Task Team. For those of you recently becoming familiar with us, it is a program at the heart of the UN Decade of Ocean Science for Sustainable Development. And it was endorsed by the UN Ocean Decade as a network program in 2021. So our mission is to elevate and strengthen the diverse perspectives of new generations of ocean professionals through a collective voice, ensuring that knowledge is transferred between experienced and early career ocean professionals to promote ocean sustainability for the ocean we want. As part of the knowledge we want to share among future professionals and professionals, we developed a series of webinars that aim to train and inform this community of ocean lovers. And today we have an exciting and super interesting webinar. So we are on episode 52, which today is dedicated to ocean data workflows from discovery to collaboration with the Ocean Data Platform. So today we have two speakers and they will present this webinar, which goes into discovering how modern ocean data workflows can take you from accessing datasets to exploring, analysing, and sharing your own work. This session includes a live walkthrough and practical examples showing how a free-to-use platform can support collaboration and help you apply these approaches in your own work using the Ocean Data Platform, which was developed by Hub Ocean. So just a reminder that you guys can write any questions or comments in the Q&A section or in the chat. We actively encourage this. We love lots of engagement, so please feel free to do this. But before we continue, I'll just break the ice with a little poll so that we can get to know who's participating today. So if Jess launches the poll, I'll give you a few minutes and then we'll look at the results. Okay, I think that's long enough. Great, cool. So, having a quick look at the results. So, we've got 50-50 split on if you're at ECOP, that's great. People from West Africa, one person from West Africa, amazing. Two from Europe and one from Oceania, nice, a good mix. That's great, thank you for answering that. So now, without further ado, we'll go on to introduce who we've got to speak to you all today. So first of all, we have Matthew Whaley. Matthew Whaley is a data lead and product manager at Hub Ocean. He's working on the Ocean Data Platform. He has a background in geoscience and is interested in improving how people find, use, and share ocean data, helping support more open, practical, and collaborative ways of working. So he will speak first, and then following him, we have Gustav Kagestan, who is a geospatial scientist and founder of Ocean Map, formerly science director at Hub Ocean. He brings scientists, institutions, and decision makers together around ocean governance, habitat mapping, and capacity building, co-developing tools that turn ocean data into action. So, Matthew, over to you.
Nice. Hi everyone, and great that you joined us. Gustav, I think you're going to give us a first quick run through of the little program for today,
Sure.
and then I'll just kick off on my bits. You
We
go for
made
it.
a little map for you guys to follow what we're actually getting you through today. So we'll hand over to Matthew shortly to do a short intro, and Matthew will take us through the basics of what we build with the Ocean Data Platform and sort of where it sits in the ocean data landscape. So we'll look at data discovery and exploration. We'll go a little bit deeper into how data workflows is happening on the data platform, how you can access data from different ways. And then once we've gone through sort of all of the main components of the platform, we'll head over to run just two different use cases. And I'll try to take you through a live demo. Um, Fingers crossed it'll work great. We'll look at a little bit of sort of how raw files can sit on the platform and how to take that all the way to published work and back again to insights. And then we'll have a small look at what it means when you're gathering data for example, marine spatial planning, and how you can do that sort of yeah, powered by the data platform. And then we'll have a final sort of Q&A. And there'll be some polls, one in the middle and a few short ones in the end. So grateful for participating in that and great to see you all. Over to you, Matthew.
Right, so super quick, then we'll get into it. Hub Ocean, we're a non-profit foundation. We're based in Oslo, and one of the things we're doing is trying to support the ocean ecosystem in the best possible way, and doing that through our particular way of working with that is through data, through technology, and trying to promote collaboration on through those three things. To do this, we're building this ocean data platform. So we're going to be talking a fair bit about that today. And this is a free to use platform. It's open. You can go and have a play with it today. You can do everything that I can do today. Well, hopefully I've got a little bit more experience, so I should be able to use it pretty well, but you'll see what you can do with it. There's tons of amazing repositories, tools, platforms out there. We're trying to add and complement the things that are out there. And I think there's three particular ways that we try to do that on particular data, for example. So we're trying to help industry get their data shared. Gustav will show you an example of that. We're trying to make sure that data that sits just in files somewhere on a website has a place to be and have more features and functionality. And we're trying to, basically be a home for any data that doesn't have a home. So make sure that there's somewhere that data can go and that it can be used early in projects, in studies, in anything. So it's a platform that is open for use for anyone, basically. Okay, first, let me show you, and again, we will use the Ocean Data Platform a fair bit in this. We assume that probably not all of you have seen this before, so hopefully that'll be useful. But again, there's loads of other tools out there, so don't we're not claiming it's the only one to use. So the dream scenario, starting from if I just dive into it, we want to work on a domain and we want to go and use a bunch of data. And we want to do something, find the insight and everything as quickly as possible. So I'm going to show you a really quick vision of what that can look like when all data is in one place. And we're going to start with some, let's imagine that we're trying to understand about protected areas. We're trying to understand about whale ship collisions. So I'm going to just throw a bunch of data here together, and I'm going to explain to you why. The reason that I can do this is because a lot of data has been standardized here. So let's say we want to look at the risk of ship strike collisions, and this is this great paper by Nisi et al., and I'll come back to that later. We want to look at protected areas. We want to look at, we want to start exploring this. We want to see where the protected areas have particular restrictions on, let's say, vessel speed. We want to understand those. And then we want to dig into some areas, and we see, for example, around South Africa, there is higher risk of ship strikes, and we want to really understand this area. Some of these marine protected areas, if we actually look into them, we can see these ones are actually supposed to be protecting seamounts, for example. So we need to bring in seamounts data, and we can do that and piece it together and and start to bring it together like sort of interesting and sort of rich view of something that starts to really accelerate the way that we can work and work with knowledge on a particular topic. So that was a very rapid and whatever like view of how this works when all the data is there and with the features it needs to kind of piece stuff together. And just to be clear, this is using the Ocean Data Platform. The data that we show here, you could also do the same in a code environment if you prefer to work with a sort of a notebook style thing and query all those data sets together. You could do the same in QGIS. And that would be another way of doing these things. So I could just show you very quickly. Let's see. What am I doing? Here we go. I could just show you another very quick example of that. So if we do protected areas again, and now I can't type because I'm trying to do it too quickly. These are my published and unpublished things. But again, so maybe we want to zoom in on that same region and we want to see protected areas here, and we want to do the same kind of analysis, but in QGIS. And again, the whole point here is that being able to do this depends on having the data available in a sort of standardized way, basically. And working in QGIS and through these other API features typically is a bit slower because we don't have full control on the stack. So that will take a second to load, but we can come back to that later on. What I'm going to then kind of take a step back and say, that's the dream that we'd love to happen for all data out there. It would be able to piece it together really quickly, get insights really quickly. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning, essentially, and tell you how that looks in practice with these data sets. So again, this is then the topic of kind of discovery and exploration. So let's say you want to work with this whale ship collisions data. And I'm actually just going to cheat a little bit because I know there's a great paper and I want to know about it. And so this is a fantastic paper that's published in 2024. It's really, really interesting stuff. There's all these fantastic maps where they correlate where whales spend their time and where there's shipping traffic. Really fascinating stuff. As with a lot of papers, and I mentioned this at the start, a lot of journal publications have data attached to them. So if you go to supplementary material, you often find some things you can download or data availability here. So if we actually wanted to work with that data and not just see the images, but we wanted to work with it in a project and develop with it, then we would need to kind of have a look at this, for example, and see on GitHub how they've done stuff. And eventually we'd find that that the data actually sits on Zenodo. And if we go via here, we can get to Zenodo. So this is actually the data from that paper. And again, this is all public data. It's CC BY license. It should be used. And we, as a community, I would love to say that we should be using this data and building and developing on rich work like this. But then, to work with this data, there's a zip file. You can have a look at what's in the zip file. You get a bunch of CSVs. And then you need to start kind of processing it that way to understand what it is. I think I can show you very quickly. Yeah. This is what happens if you download one of those CSVs, for example, and you get some data like this that you can then start kind of working with. So then you need to pull this in some kind of environment, in a coding environment or QGIS or something else, and then you personally can kind of start to work with that data. So where we kind of think the Ocean Data Platform can play an interesting role here is what we want to do is make sure that data like this has a home, that it can be transformed in a way and made findable and accessible to lots of people so that you don't have to go through all of that process in order to get access to it. But you can find it in our catalog, so you can search for some data, and maybe it's this was perhaps the data you're looking for. You can understand the contents of the data through the metadata. You can see the source, and you can go back to the source. So if you want to go back to the source and do your own work on this, that's of course totally fine. But instead of it just sitting as a CSV file, this is more interactive. It has APIs associated with it. You can consume it in QGIS. through vector tiles in the web mapping we have. And you can also explore the table itself and really understand the data in a lot more rich way. I mean, when you look at the CSV at first, this is a different one. This then, shows you, I don't know where it's gone, but never mind. A lot more rich information. We can add descriptions to the columns that mean that users that come to it for the first time can actually understand a lot more what's going on with the data. And that means that you can see the distributions, you can understand what the different columns are. And that means that when you come to do things like this map exploration, you can really understand what the data is. And that's how, data like this can end up usable in a sense like this. So this heat map that we see here, I'll just show you just that this heat map is directly from this paper, and by kind of working with it in this way, we think that we give it a sort of a rich functionality and not just, and it's not just a benefit for one person, a private benefit. It's a benefit that you can share with other people through the platform, or you can make it public and publish it so that others get to benefit from this. And then together as a community, actually, we can build the value on top of this data in a much more sort of agile and good way. I'll show you very quickly two other examples that I won't take so much time on them. But for example, we threw in some data from Seamounts, and I'm going to just show some other great platforms. I mean, Pangaea, that will be one that a lot of people are familiar with. This is a fantastic place where a lot of people publish fantastic data. So some of the data that we pulled in looks like this. This Yes et al. Seamounts data. This is the latest version. But again, you go through a similar process. If you want to interact with the data, you should download it, get a zip file, open the zip file, explore, etc., etc. And again, that's where we try to say, if you're looking for Seamounts data, or if you work with Seamounts data, then maybe you can find a way to reach it through our platform as well. And as soon as it's there, then it's available for everyone else in the world to kind of build upon in this kind of standardized way. Finally, last one in that mix is this amazing work that I would like to highlight from Protected Seas. Again, finding it impossible to type today. And Protected Seas are a non-profit that have done this amazing work standardizing lots of marine protected areas and sort of across the globe, and making sure regulations get kind of harmonized in a way so that you can actually compare across lots of different countries. And again, they have this fantastic setup where you can explore their data in their web map. What we've done in collaboration with them is make sure that their data is also available through the Ocean Data Platform. And that means that not only can you visualize it on their map, but should you want to work with it, and again, the same principles are true if you want to understand what's in the data or understand what the different columns are. And bear in mind that this has 87 columns, and there's a huge number of different types of regulations that they've kind of categorized. So for each one of those, there's a column, for example, bottom trawling. Does the marine protected area prohibit bottom trawling, restrict it, all these things. This is actually, information that it's sometimes hard to kind of, you have to put multiple sources together. There's maybe some documentation and some other things. So where we can add good metadata to the data and allow people to use it in a great way, it allows really good things to happen. So that's meant as a kind of a bit of a whirl of like what the world looks like, perhaps when you go out and look for data. Sometimes you're Googling for data and you find something, and it might be a file somewhere, and it doesn't have a particular service associated with it. In other cases, and of course, there are amazing places out there with great services. I mean, the likes of OBIS and GBIF, and I mean, all the data in NOAA, Copernicus Marine Service. I could go on and on and on. There's amazing data with great services. But there's also some that needs a place that provides a little bit more, or at least we feel like there's a value that can be added there. So we've now got to this point that I kind of started from, which is finding and exploring ocean data. So what we can see there is that when we have the capacity to kind of standardize and a place to put things, you can build up quite an interesting picture of data. Again, I'm going to come back to this data that I talked about, the Nisi et al. Whale ship collisions. And let's now imagine that we were doing something with this. So let's say that what we really were interested in was this attribute, all of the risk of whales for ship strikes. And actually, we're just going to focus on the high end of the spectrum. So we're just going to focus on what the highest risk areas are that are, and this is the results of the model by Nisi et al. So it's a version of the truth based on the data that they have available to them. But it's a really interesting exploration point. So we can see some of these hotspots. And like I said before, maybe we add on top of that this protected seas MPA layer, and we categorize that on vessel speed. I'm going to color it slightly differently so it's a bit easier. So in this case, then we have orange being very restricted and yellow being prohibited. Now we can start to see this interplay of where we have some vessel restrictions and some hotspots, or sometimes there are hotspots with no protection. And actually, this was one of the purposes of the Nisi et al. Paper, which was to highlight where there are protected areas and where there aren't protected areas to do with particular hotspots and things like this. If again, we go over to South Africa, where we know that there's a huge amount of vessel traffic and therefore there's potential for a lot of collisions, again, we can start to understand which of these marine protected areas actually have a focus on vessel speed and which don't. And like I said at the beginning, maybe we find out that actually some of these are associated with seamounts. Maybe that takes us down a different thread, but and you start to want to see what the seamounts are. Or maybe not. So what this means then is that we're at the starting point of doing some really interesting work with data like this. And maybe you have some research questions that follow on from this. So one example of that is maybe we are really interested in this particular area and you want to go off and do some particular work on that. And again, supporting people to continue working on the data that's available to them is a real important aspect for us. So, for example, let's say you were only interested in that area, so so you wanted to kind of really highlight down into that area and particularly things to do with vessel speed restrictions. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to vessel speed, and I'm going to filter that for just between 1 and 2. Now, that's because I've read this from before and I know it's prohibited and restricted that I'm interested in. So we're going to filter like that. And we can apply a filter and see this is then global result for vessel speed restrictions. And this is just a way of exploring the data. It just gives you a sample, not the full data set, but it's a way of kind of interacting with it. And then let's say that we just put a focus on that region that we were in. Again, so we're going to do something like this, South Africa. And since I know Gustav spent a lot of his working life working in the Wire region, I'm going to include at least some of that. And we can apply some filters. And then we end up with a refined sort of 63 marine protected areas that we might be interested in. So this might be some data that we want to then work with in a project. So you have a few options. Some of you might be used to working just with files. So maybe you just want to export that as a file. So we can do that. We can just export. I mean, if you haven't worked with Parquet files before, I would just say they're a really powerful tool because they actually really kind of contain a lot of the key information, structured information about the data types, unlike kind of CSVs and GeoJSONs that can get a little bit messy. But of course, there's kind of CSV and GeoJSON too, depending on what you're used to. So that's one way you can work with it, and maybe you work with that locally. Another way is, for example, if you're used to coding in Python or R, then you can take the code example that we have from this and copy it into a code environment that you have. So let's say you want to copy this and work with it. And I'm going to actually open a workspace that we host on also as part of the Ocean Data Platform, essentially. And that makes it accessible to other people. So I'm going to open this, which is a kind of data science workspace we have. I'm going to create a notebook. And I'm just going to drop in that copy and paste that I did and show you essentially the results of that. So this is then doing a query on the whole data set, and it's going to extract that particular subset of data from that. And bear in mind, this is this is about 1 GB of data of complex polygons, so it takes a minute, but it'll get there. And when we do that, then we end up with that in a coding environment, and we can start to work with that in a really interesting way going forwards. So what's next? Yeah, sort of final mechanism of working with the stuff I'd like to highlight is QGIS. I think it's a really interesting. Let me just load that again because that needs to refresh. Really interesting way of doing things. So let's say add that again. Live demos always have their pros and cons. Let's see. All right, let's pop that there. See what we got. But this sort of interesting thing here is also that you can pull this data into these different environments and start working with it. Let me see. And then start to kind of iterate on it, basically. The other thing that we can show that's kind of interesting is the ability to add data to the platform. And that's essentially the way that you can then go to the platform itself and add something. Let me just start a new tab because then we can show. So you notice that I downloaded before a subset of data, and I'm just going to add then protected seas subset around South Africa. And I'm going to actually add back that file just to show you how that can work and so the whole flow. And again, these capabilities are available to you as a user, so you might want to upload the data. Once it's a file, then that's accessible as a file to other people. But we can also convert certain tabular formats in like Parquet, CSV, GeoJSON into these tables with the interactive features that you see. And that's the process that we get to here. And essentially, what we do here is then ability to then use those features that we have, but on the subset of data. And this is then entirely owned by me, just me, and it's private to me. And so it's for my purposes and my research. And it's in my control as to what I want to do with it. So it has the same features that you see in the rest of the platform. It gets the same functionalities, but it's private to me. I'm the admin. And if I want to give it to Gustav, for example, to remember his email, but or copy it from somewhere. But let's see, is he a user? Yes, he is. Good. Then I can also do that, and then he has the option to also edit it as well. If he also wants to publish it, we can request to publish if we think it merits publishing in the public catalog. But we do encourage people to ensure that there's proper licensing information and provider information before it goes into a public catalog, because it's important that we have that information available. So just coming back to these flows, you'll notice that this query then returns some data, and then we can start working with it. That's just a little subset. And again, I think the other little thing I could show is having ingested some data to the platform, I then have it available to me here. So you can see it's unpublished, but even through the WFS link, I can then start to pull in a subset of data into my, oh, you know what, that's why, sorry. I couldn't think why it wasn't loading the data properly, but it's because, yeah, I had the wrong projection system. Sorry about that. Yeah, great. That makes sense. I just thought it wasn't loading, but hey, there you go. But you can see how then I can pull in data here, and then again, perhaps I want to work on this data. I want to do something with it. QGIS is extremely powerful and it allows you to do a bunch of things like maybe actually we're interested in creating buffer zones around marine protected areas. You know, I'll let I'll let Gustav do the real examples because he's a proper ocean scientist. I just play around with the stuff, you know. But perhaps we want to create some buffer zones around marine protected areas that have speed restrictions for whatever reason. And again, maybe we want to create that data as a new data set. And let's see, buffer zone. And again, we can go back to our platform, the my data section, and say maybe we want to add this Matthews buffer zone without scientific merit. And then, because we've created some new data set, we've got this GeoJSON, we can also put that into the platform. And again, because it's GeoJSON, we can recognize the data type and we can adjust it to a table. And for example, I can then, again, share this with Gustav. And then he could potentially take this and use it in his own work as well. Perhaps then this was something that I needed to add in order to make some sense of the map that we had. And again, maybe then I want to add it into this view. Matthews buffer zone without merit, which is this name, and then we can start to kind of work with this. And again, this would be accessible to Gustav now as well, and he could make the same map, and we could share that between us and start to collaborate.
Matthew, you mind
Yes,
putting it in a data collection for me?
in a
Calling,
data
calling it,
collection.
just move those
Yeah,
data sets to the collection. They
which
call it
collection?
the ACOP demo. Make a new one.
Yeah, I can do that for you. Okay, so now we're in the part of I think the webinar where I'll hand over to Gustav, and hopefully you've got a taste for some of these different components, basically. And what Gustav will then try to do is put a slightly more practical case around this with a little bit more scientific meaning, rather than just piecing together random features like I do. But basically, the challenge here, I think, is we see the opportunity of putting data together in useful ways and giving it these services that allow this kind of working on top of it and iteration and all this stuff, great stuff to happen. So that's really where we're going to go on with these use cases. And yeah, so I'm going to quickly put that in a collection. And while we're doing that, we got a couple of little questions at this point. Again, if anyone has any burning questions that they want to ask now, that's totally fine. But also, we'll just launch, I think, Lily, a quick poll on your reflections so far and challenges that you have. And then we can really, while Gustav's talking, I can also have a look at any answers you guys have, and yeah, and then we can touch on them at the end of the webinar if there's something that you would like to raise. Yeah, so just throw any ideas or thoughts that you have in there. That would be fantastic.
Great. Thank you so much, Matthew. That was fascinating stuff, and it looks like a really, really interesting platform. I'm definitely going to be looking into that for some work I'm doing on marine protected areas around Scotland. So yeah, really, really interesting. Yeah, so hope you guys can all see that poll that Jess has put up with a little question in it. So give you a few minutes to answer that. And then we'll move on to Gustav and what he has to say.
Awesome. Yes. All right. Is this going to help you out, Gustav? ECOP webinar demo.
Yeah,
So this
I
is
just
how
wanted to throw you an unexpected challenge. I
an
think
unexpected challenge.
you can add the data sets to that collection, right? The ones you created.
I can indeed. So we're going to do this. Again, I'm sure some of this looks a bit fast and difficult to follow. Sorry about that. We're just trying to get through some stuff and show you a little bit of the range of stuff that we can do. But we really we'll mention at the end, of course, but log in and try. We have a Slack community if you want to ask questions. If you try some stuff out and you can't figure out how to do stuff, please know we're around and happy to talk. But good stuff. Shall I throw it over to you?
Yes, sure. So are we doing
Can
the
everyone,
poll
s-
first?
can everyone see those results, or is there no short answers?
I can
I don't
see
actually see them.
that it has been answered. I can't see the actual answers though. Maybe that's just me.
Oh no, it's probably because it's a short answer question. That's okay. If people want to put their answers into the chat, then maybe it can be a discussion point for the Q&A session.
Perfect.
Great.
All right, good
Over
stuff.
to you, Gustav, then when you're
All
ready.
right. Everyone can see my screen, I hope.
Um,
So,
yeah.
yep. All right. Thank you, Matthew. That was great. You took us through all of the basics of the platform. I understand it's a bit, a lot of details to take in, but just try to follow us along and hopefully you'll get to see this sort of repeated now also when I show some actual use cases. So anyway, so we'll go over and show it some different examples of how you can actually use the platform. And one that's been with us for a while is a large industry data set, which captures fisheries data from Antarctica. And so we'll go and have a look what that can look like. It's about krill, so we can search for krill in the catalog. It's actually data collection that I know well, so we'll go into the collection. Now, what we're looking at here is Aker BioMarine, now Aker Krill Company. They shared all of their sonar acoustic data from their fishing operations over 15 years. And so Hub Ocean is working to get more industry data shared to science, and this is maybe the most successful effort out of everything we've done. And so this is essentially just raw files with, if you're familiar with sonar data, this is a split beam sonar. There's actually almost 500,000 little lines, and these are recorded when they're searching for krill in the fishing operation. Yeah, so not maybe that easy to use off the bat, but we've also created a data set to show you where all those lines are, so we can go in, we can open it in the Explore table or the Explore map, and we can have a look at all of those track lines. And we could maybe color it on something interesting, maybe what the vessel was, or maybe the year. We can do a year as well. So here you can see where they've actually been fishing for krill in Antarctica. And so, they kind of keep going back to the same hotspots and they've been fishing and fishing and fishing. And so this kind of data set is obviously quite interesting for science. It may not be calibrated, but it is representing an intensity of sampling that most scientific records simply don't have. So what was done then was, well, a few different scientists have had a whack at this data set. But yeah, the first ones we worked with was Sebastian and Dominic from AWI and HI in Norway and Germany. And there's a blog for those that are sort of interested to see what we did with it. But simply put, we gave them access to all of these files and compute in the cloud. And they crunched through all of that data, and they made some cool publications, and there's more to come. This blog shows you a bit of that and also shows you how you can pull in the data yourself and have a look inside the raw files from our workspaces. So anyway, they did some nice parallel processing compute. They actually then made a publication about the predators that you could see in the data set. And I thought that was quite amazing. So you can actually see the bubble trails from penguins, and you can see the whales underneath the vessels, and then you can start looking at where are the krill and where are the predators. Anyway, so that's a really nice publication you can go through if that interests you. But let's just have a look at the data. So in this paper, there's obviously some graphs and there's some maps. And then similar like Matthew showed, the data itself that they produced ends up in the Synode archive. And and so it sits here, and you have to have some skill to know how to get it. The actual observations from the predators are in a R specific format. There's some information about the vessel fleet movements. So I took that data and I put it back on the Ocean Data platform, and we can have a look at what that looks like. Again, I think it was just there. And now there's two data sets, I think. Let's have a look at this one. And so again, same thing here. You can read about all the different columns now that it's been standardized and put in our tabular format. I actually put the PDFs on here as well from the paper and some other additional information. So if we go in and explore, sorry, I have to put this one. Now we can actually have a look at where the whales. Yeah, here we can actually look at the penguins. Those are the bubble trails, and we can look at where the whales are in this data set as well. And so that's pretty cool. We could add that data set with track line. Let's see if we find that. We can start overlapping where the fishing is, and maybe we'll move that. Yeah, start exploring this data. And so I think this shows sort of the story of that the platform is kind of flexible. You can throw in large amount of raw files as well and put it to work. And then you can go back then and check this science. You can run the code yourself and so on. So that's all I wanted to show with this case. Of course, we can add the additional whale data that Matthew just showed, and we can add MPAs, and we can do all sort of things here, or bring that into some other GIS environment. Now, I'm going to switch over to the next use case, and that's, let's see, sorry,
You ended up on mute there, Gustav. Somehow.
nice. Okay, I just tried to move the control bar and I went mute. Thank you. Okay, so we'll go over to the next use case, and I just wanted to show some work that I was involved in prior to working with Hub Ocean. We put together lots and lots of data for marine spatial planning in the West Indian Ocean, together with the Nairobi Convention, and we created a tool. I think this is it's kind of fairly commonly done in different ways for both marine protected area planning, zoning, as well as marine spatial planning. This specific tool does cumulative impact assessments. So I just wanted to show you sort of what that looks like. And what you kind of have to do one way or the other when you really want to manage the ocean is have to bring together a lot of data. And so this is just an example of that. Here you have ecosystem components, as it's called here. That includes a ton of different themes, right? Here's habitats as well as species. And every one of those needs to have data behind it. And so there's a whole process and there's a number of data sources. If you want to keep it simple, maybe you just put one global layer in. But often for MSP, you really want to bring out the best of what you have for the process to be credible. And you also are likely to redo your work within a few years or 4 or 5 years, perhaps. So, like being able to run something fairly transparently as well as iteratively becomes important. you can still do it with the desktop setup, and but then you have to redo your work over and over again, and it's hard to explain to others what you created, and it's hard to build trust around black box. Anyway, this work specifically has open source R code together with it, but it doesn't have a way to organize the sort of the ingredients behind it. So it does take some work to re or update these maps. So we've actually got and again, and also this kind of tool often uses standardized units. In this case, it's a stack of rasters with the same pixel size that all of the data has been forced into. So I wanted to show you a feature on the platform that can deal with this quite nicely and give you some additional options. And the platform has support for something called H3 tiles. And this is one example of a standardized coordinate system. It's made by Uber, and you can see that it has these sort of fixed hexagons, and you can zoom in down to almost a meter. And so this is a way, and then for every one of them, there's a little index that tells you where that sits in the world. The nice thing with the hexagons too is that they have an equal size, which is important for having sort of a consistent tool. So if we head over to the documentation on the platform, and yeah, it's quite rich. So I encourage you, if you're interested, to go in and have a look. There's both some nice sort of overview as well as really into the details. And of course, this could be a great place to point your AI support if that's what you're using for your coding to really being able to read and write and analyze data using some of the custom tools for the Ocean Data Platform. But if we go into the reference book where you're coding with Python or R, so this is our sort of package to connect through R and Python, there's actually something called aggregations. Now, what aggregation can do, it can aggregate uh, statistics about your data without moving it from the Ocean Data Platform. And not moving data may not be so important when you're running a very small data set. But if you're running very large data, and also if you want to work in a collaborative environments, maybe a colleague around the globe want to run the same thing as you, not moving data can be a very good thing. Anyway, so we have some of that supported, and it can then aggregate based on the spatial unit of hexagons, which is quite nice. And so let's just see what that looks like. Let's say we want to aggregate some coral data for a start. And maybe I'll just searching the web. I know there's something called Allen Coral Atlas. They have, again, similar like Matthew showed, they have an atlas which is actually quite good, and they have a way to access data. And you can start exploring the data in their own GUI and downloading it. But you might be looking at 8 or 10 sources of corals. You might be looking at some local data sets. You might want to bring in OBIS, which is the Global Biodiversity Observation Database, etc. And now it gets a bit more complex. So what we've done on the platform is we've tried to then gather useful habitat data, for example. So if we just search for coral, I think Allen Coral Atlas will show up. So there's already some data here sitting ready to be used by you. And we can also add additional data into a data collection that we share. So we did that actually and if you're interested specifically in corals as well as seagrasses, we did 2 in-depth webinars on this topic, and I'll steal a little bit from that. I'll jump a bit forth and back to show you what can be done. But if you really want to see it, go and check those webinars out. We had researchers from around the world helping us put together sort of best available coral and seagrass data in a few different sessions. And just an example of that, I'm switching to seagrass for a second. Let's see if I found that collection. Seagrass collections. This is my prep. Okay, anyway, so what we did in that specific case, we created a data collection and we added lots of different data sets about seagrass. We filtered, for example, OBIS and created a selection of just observations of seagrass in that very large data set. OBIS has something like 250 million rows in it. We've filtered out 2 million rows on the Ocean Data Platform and put it in a collection. So you can then gather lots and lots of ingredients for one of these data sets in one place. But we have to put it together as well to something useful for a manager. If we would put all of these in GIS would break, frankly. And yeah, and there's also a lot of different spatial scales involved in those data. There's different maps, there's just different formats, different spatial scales, and so on. So one way to overcome that, or one little trick, is to start aggregating data on sort of these standardized units. That's what the cumulative impact assessment that I showed had done as well. And so I went over to our workspaces. This is what meets you when you go in there. Again, you can do the same thing from other cloud-based workspaces like Google Colab, but we have a Jupyter Lab environment set up here. I could be running this locally as well on my computer, just then data has to move to my computer. So we can use Python, we can use R, and there's also something called JJS, which is sort of fairly early days for a web-based sort of QGIS or web-based GIS that's sort of based on QGIS. Anyway, so I've started a notebook, and what this notebook does, I won't run it all today. I think that'll be a bit much, but I'm starting this GIS window, and I actually headed over to the Caribbean to confuse you even more. But here we can create a few different areas of interest. So we have I made a global area. I made sort of a zoomed area, which is all the way in here, and I made a regional area. And so I can use those to pull data in from the Ocean Data Platform. And so what I did is I took switched back to coral again, away from the seagrasses. But anyway, I went and grabbed a number of those data sets. So I found them on the catalog, or I didn't find them and I ingested them and put it in my data space. And so I grabbed the little ID that fetches the data. We could dare to run this live. I filter it, and so you have to know what you're grabbing. Again, Matthew showed that you get little code snippets actually on the platform, so you can work a bit sort of together with the platform to grab those filters. But anyway, I did this directly in Python, and I'm cropping it based on that box. In fact, I think that this one was on the regional box, and I can add it to my layer, and it takes a few seconds. And so when it's loaded, we'll see those polygons in my GIS. Note that if I load two large things, this workspace is going to fill up quickly. And so we're still moving data around, the same as you would in your local environment. As soon as you're moving data, you have to be aware of how much you're moving. And if you're in a small area, maybe it's not a problem. Let's see if it actually works. Sometimes if you load too much in these spaces, they actually time out or have some issues, which I think I just experienced right now. Okay, anyway, let's actually move on from that. But what you would see if I run this properly, and if you check the old demo, is these different sources from the local to the global looking very different, and they cover a very different space. But when you bring them together, you get a really interesting picture. So what we can then do, if we just skip ahead in this script, we can go to the aggregation. And so I've chosen to aggregate data based on resolution 9, which is about 0.1 square kilometer. And let's just dare to run it, see if this works. And so we're actually aggregating now in this region if there's any coral reefs in our little hexagons. And if there are, it's going to return us back, yes, there's a coral here, and it's from this source. And I'll do that from all my different sources. And here we're bringing in the OBIS observations as well, and we're combining them into a map. We're making them spatial. And I think we're adding it. And so here you can see we created a table, and then it has the ID of that hexagon and it has the source of a coral if we saw one. And we can add that to the map. Again, something probably happened to this workspace because I ran it too many times. But I'll head over to the platform in a second and show you what it looks like. And then we can also push this programmatically to Ocean Data Platform. And this is true for any source you bring in as well. And actually, I've been quite successful using, for example, Claude Cowork to sort of take official metadata and help make it look really nice on the Ocean Data Platform. If you train a skill based on the documentation, it's much quicker than you think now to deal with the nitty-gritty of metadata and get things in, and then you do your human control and you're good to go. And so actually bringing in data programmatically is much easier than it ever was. Anyway, we'll head out of this very quick dip into the workspace and go back to the platform. And hopefully now I'll wrap it all nicely together. Let's see, we got Matthew's work. Let's go into the coral data set. All right, let's do this one. We'll open, so I made this actually also global when I ran these webinars. So I first ran it in my local spot. I then ran it on my regional spot, and then I just said, what the hell, I'm gonna run it for the whole globe. And it ran in 4 hours. And I thought that was pretty cool. So here again, we're in the Table Explorer. These tiles can look a bit funny until they've loaded properly. So just bear with it. If you bring in some very complex data, this is also something that happens and it takes a little bit of time. For example, if we load Allen Coral Atlas, it has 40 million geometries inside it. It's been a bit of a challenge for the backend team. And so it actually works fairly okay, but Matthew would tell you we're working on a new, even faster update that's going to just make things fly even better. Okay, anyway, so we can add more data now. So I'll just show you. So if we click on one of these polygons, this shows coral reef. This also shows coral reef. But you see how one has two sources of data. This is from WCMC and Allen Coral Atlas. They both say there's a coral in this hexagon. And we can also read about the metadata and so on about each and every source. So this is quite interesting for conference building as well, because there's going to be lots and lots of gaps and lots of problems everywhere you turn in the marine data space. Specifically, corals and seagrasses are notoriously hard to model properly. So this kind of data synthesis based on maps is actually quite useful. Now we can add some more data to it. We could add those original data. Maybe we'll do that. Because I think this one loads quickly. We could bring in the actual polygons if we want to see it. Here you'll see some of those polygons. We could add. Let's switch on the private data. Let's see. Matthew buffer zone without that sounds very good. I'll need that one. And protected seas. Let's see what we had. If maybe we'll bring in the anyway. So we brought in Matthew's data that he just shared with me as well. Give it a second to load. Okay, so essentially what we've done is we brought in lots and lots of ingredients and we brought them together to create standardized units that are ready for management at the management scale, not the nitty-gritty habitat scale. And so the nice thing is if somebody then comes and complains that your data isn't in there, maybe that data is even private and can't be shared, then perhaps you can bring that into your My Data space or their My Data space, add just the derived product from these hexagons and say, and add that to the final map so that that data can still be used in your ocean governance project even though it's sensitive in its raw form. So this is also a way to sort of break down data silos, because data can be private at the raw side and then be public at some scale that works for you. Now, if we go back to where I started, this is just one single layer out of 100. Um, and so the challenge to do this is still not trivial. Um, but anyway, we believe this is one useful way of using the platform. And again, you can collaborate then. If we go back to my data space, for example, in the core reef, oh, this is the axis view. You can see here this is just actually me collaborating with myself. Um, but let's go here. Yeah, so here I created a number of these sort of derived data sets, and I could then collaborate with other researchers around the world and create an even better product, and then we can request to publish it in the catalog. And I think, Matthew, am I missing something that I was going to show? Now I went into rambling space. We might be ready for our
I
polls.
don't think so. I think that's hopefully a good tour of some possibilities and some options, and I hope I think it's well, I really enjoyed what you showed, Gustav, as always.
Uh, okay, let me stop sharing. There we go. And we can see each other. Anyway, so I think with that, I'm done. I just want to give you a flavor of different ways of using this kind of platform. I know it's quite a lot to take in the first time you see it. Just remember, it's also can be just a very simple way to find data or to store data. But when you're growing into this, there are many ways to use this in concert with other systems, right? So there are many other good tools out there, and we try to be interoperable both through your sort of existing data flow, may be very local, or maybe you're flying off in the cloud and super good at data science. Um, but we both want to meet you where you are, as well as sort of encourage some new ways of thinking around data. And I do believe, especially in this like it feels like a bit fragmented world, collaboration is so important. So we hope this kind of technology really can encourage and help a more collaborative mindset between scientists, between industry, between governance, and across borders. And I think over to you, Lily, with the polls.
Amazing, cool. Thank you so much, Gustav and Matthew. Again, that was really, really fascinating stuff. And yeah, I feel like there is so much potential with a platform like that for all the collaboration side of things is always a challenge, and that's a really amazing tool to help with that. So yeah, I think we've got one more poll that I think Jess is going to do. There we go. So if we give everyone 1 minute to, well, 2 minutes maybe to have a go answering that, and then we can go through the answers, and we have a couple of questions as well, so we can talk about those afterwards. So just give you all a few minutes.
Perfection, just to highlight what people are thinking and filling things in. Just to say, this is this is out there, but I think the link's there in that third question to the platform itself. Do feel free to go and have a look. And we're developing this now, so this is not a finished product. We really welcome people's thoughts and engagement and feedback. So we're really keen to hear anything that people have thoughts of how they could use it or how they couldn't use it. It helps us. It helps us a lot. So yeah, really appreciate people's feedback if they have any.
Yeah, and I think that's also a, sort of an opportunity. This product has been around for about a year, so it's definitely fully working and ready to be put to to real tasks. But it's still very easy to get hold of the backend engineers. For example, if you're actually signing up to the Slack community, you'll be surprised of the amount of support you can get. And yeah, give us a little bit of time. We're sometimes busy, but we'll ensure we support you where however we can. And yeah, that's the fun thing with being reasonably early, I think. You'll be well tended to.
Right, I'm going to end the poll now, if that's okay, everybody.
Thanks, Jess. Great. So, okay, cool. Can everybody see those results? Well, you can see question 2 results. Jess, we can't see the answers to question 1 or 3. Perhaps you could send them to me and I can read through them. So let's just look at question 2. Which topics are most relevant to your work? So we've got a kind of mix of all of them. The most being uploading, managing, sharing, and publishing data. So that was cool. You guys spoke about that and how, if I remember rightly, you can upload it for your own personal use and then you can publish it if it's got the right sort of credentials. And I'm guessing you guys kind of vet it before it gets published to everybody, or is it, yeah, is that how it works?
Yeah, that's right. So you can do any private sharing you wish, but we'll if you want to put it in the public catalog for everyone else to access it, we just do a couple of checks to make sure that it's got a good license and it should be out there in the world kind of thing. But it's not too high. Yeah, the bar isn't higher. It's just to do the right thing.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's important. Otherwise, can get a bit of a mess.
Yeah.
But that's great. And then finding, exploring, filtering, accessing ocean data. Yeah, I think that's the thing that I would be using it for the most. That's really interesting. I think it makes it really accessible because when you're kind of starting a project where you're wanting to get all this data, it's a bit overwhelming to know where to start sometimes. So I think this is a really good point to start at and really accessible. So I think that's really cool for that. I'll just go back to the previous poll. So to remind everybody, what is your biggest challenge when finding, accessing, or using ocean data? So we had two main answers were unstructured and scattered data was one of them, and having it all in one place was the other one for the biggest challenge. So do you want to add anything to those or
I think those are good things to attack with the Ocean Data platform and you're on your side, yeah.
Yeah, that sounds pretty spot on. Probably the top 2 challenges generally. So sounds like we got some informed attendees. I think I'd maybe just flag one thing, which is obviously what we've shown is the data that is on the platform. We haven't shown the data that isn't on the platform, right? It's got to be frank and honest here. There's obviously so much data that isn't on the platform. So, that doesn't work for every single workflow, that everything is already there. The point that I think we're trying to say is that, that's kind of to some extent unfeasible. Generally, there will always be new data that you wished were there. What we try to make sure is that it also has the functionality that you can add that and create your own body of work that you can then build on as well. So then it complements and it starts to build together. So, and if that becomes useful, then you have a kind of at least one place where you can go to standardize a bunch of stuff, so that you then can iterate on your project. And next time you come back to it, maybe it's all there ready for you, partly because you've done some of the work, maybe you've filled some of those gaps, but you filled them for yourself and others. So that's where it's collaboration, known collaboration, and with people in the community, I think. So that would be the dream. So we're hoping that the platform can serve a purpose like that.
And also, maybe we didn't make that clear, but there are some data that is unique on the platform. So we don't only go and grab, data from elsewhere. So we try to support researchers where they're at. If there's some unique data that we think is useful, we sometimes help put that data to good use. For example, we have some global maps of seabed substrates that is not easily found elsewhere, including where all the records were from that was used to create the maps. And we also work hard to get industry to share more. And yeah, I showed one of those examples, but there are more. Industry data sharing takes time, so there's yeah. But when you actually get it to work there, they can be really, really useful. Um, anyway, so
Great.
please go ahead and search for new stuff as well.
Yeah. Great. Cool. So we've got a couple of questions as well. We're right for time. Yep. So first one is, what type of data set can you upload onto the website? I guess, and what form does it need to be in, I suppose?
So I think on a basic level, any file can go on the platform. So it doesn't matter what the file format is, it can be put on the platform, and that file can get metadata. So in the example that Gustav showed of the ecosound data from Aker BioMarine, for example, we haven't done anything special with that very proprietary ecosound file format. It's hosted essentially as a file that then you need to download and understand. But what we do allow is that for any file to have that kind of metadata, that means that you can put a geospatial or temporal location on it, so that people can find those files in the right way. So that's the basic level. What we do on top of that is all that interactivity you see, the maps and all this other stuff is served on data that is essentially a sort of tabular or feature-based geospatial vector formats. And so for three file types currently, in the platform itself, you can export essentially or ingest from a file type, and the three file types are CSV, GeoJSON, and Parquet files. And for those three file types, you can just click a button and it'll turn from a file into this kind of structured table with a map and all this other stuff, assuming it's got a geometry, et cetera, et cetera. So there's always a lot of kind of nuances to that because it needs to have a geometry to have the map features and all this other stuff. But so those are the three that we do particularly like that. I think we absolutely see there's a need to add probably a couple other file types there, but also the bigger picture moving forward is also that currently we do that, but we don't handle raster and gridded data in a sort of sophisticated way. So that's a bigger body of work that we're going to do and roll out at some point. Yeah, in the coming months or so. I would hate to put a timeline on it, but that's going to come as well because that's obviously a huge other dimension of geospatial data that we don't serve right now. You can put a GeoTIFF on the platform today and share that file with someone, so there's no kind of limitation there, but you don't get all the lovely features like putting onto a map and all this other stuff yet. So that's what we're working to bring to the table. Great question.
Great, thank you. That was really, really helpful. And then one more question. Well, two questions from the same person. So the first one is about live data. So are the connections that you were showing, I think it was quite near the start, are they live and auto updating from the source or periodic snapshots? And then I'll just give you the second one now as well. But is there a roadmap for using AI? I think you did talk about this a little bit, actually. I'll just read it anyway. For using AI to surface intersections across variables, such as flagging spatial or thematic gaps that point to areas needing further research. So yeah, two different questions there.
Yeah, great questions.
Yeah,
So the sort of live data one, I think so that depends on the data set, from data set to data set, essentially. Now, a lot of data, like the publication data, typically is a static thing that kind of exists, and that's the version of it. So that's the version that you get, and it has kind of immutability is there, and that's how it should be. Other data does change with time. So what we do with the data sets that we maintain, at least, is we have pipelines that serve those particular data sets and keep them up to date as to when they need to be. Now, that's code that we run essentially on our side as users as the platform in the same way that other people can use it. So you can set up those flows yourself, and if you want to rerun a pipeline every however often, that's kind of that's up to you maintaining that data essentially. So it's not a feature that the data is updated. It's kind of a process of this ingestion and the data engineering that you would, well, data engineering is a big word, but maintaining these kind of pipelines and services to make sure that the data is up to date. But basically, the metadata should reflect whether the data is updated and all this other stuff. So that's really important as well. Again, but it's yeah. Again, that's a huge thing. I mean, we don't want to be, especially for data sets that are out there and alive. It's important that there's not sort of stale data sitting all over the place, or at least it's very clear to people whether they're using a particular snapshot or whether it's something. But yeah, so that's the first one. And AI for understanding data gaps. I think it's a super rich topic. I think we experiment and work a lot with AI in our development process and our understanding of data. And as Gustav mentioned, things like applications to understanding metadata and all this stuff. I think it's numerous applications. I'm sure everyone is kind of as uncovering. We're obviously trying to be careful and make sure that that it's used in the right contexts, that it's not just kind of randomly scraping data and not checking it properly, and there's not the proper quality control or human control in the loop for data. But in interpretation, I think, yeah, it's got a really strong purpose. You know, yeah, we're looking at the right way to kind of integrate that as part of the platform. I mean, obviously, as a user today, you can, as Gustav mentioned, really, like you can very easily point your favorite AI thing to some documentation and ask it for help on writing code, for example, and the code will then help you answer certain questions, and you can build stories like this, or creating visualizations on top of data. Again, everything you see in our front end, our website, our web app, whatever you want to call it, is actually kind of something that you could create yourself in a sense, like if it was like, because it's all based on APIs, it's all based on services that are available to you. So you can access the metadata, you can access the data, you could create your own version of a map explorer to serve your own purpose, like data gaps, for example, with the assistance of AI. So I think it's a really rich opportunity. So yeah, long answer, sorry, but
Yeah, that was great. No worries. Cool. Well, so if anyone else has any other questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll give you a minute. But otherwise, I think that marks the end of the webinar. So thank you, both of you, very much. That was really interesting. And thank you for accepting our invitation, showing us your really interesting platform, and I hope, good luck with its growth and everything. It's early days, but it's a really interesting tool. Thank you also everyone for participating in the webinar, and please stay tuned for looking out for our next episodes and the other work that we do on our social media channels. So yeah, there's no other questions come up through the chat, so I think we'll end it there.
Everyone.
thank you all so much.